Okay, so the recording is live, and I think we are good to start whenever we want.
Well, good morning, everyone. Or, I guess it isn't morning. Good afternoon, really.
Nice. Already
Feels like
starting off strong.
I know, right?
More
You
like good
flubbed the
evening.
first line, Mikey, okay? God damn it. God.
Yeah, that's overrated. You don't need that first line, anyways. But so we wanted to talk about a few topics today for dungeon masters, some players that might have like some questions on like how like a dungeon master operates, and maybe gets like a little bit of insight on their mindset and why they make some of the decisions that they do. So we have a few list of topics that we want to start off by, and it's like when you're starting a campaign, do you want to have it like a milestone or maybe an XP game, uh, XP campaign? Maybe you need help dealing with players that metagame, or even being a dungeon master, you metagaming against your players yourself. Um, what if you have some players that just they don't seem interested in just playing the campaign in general, or you have players that just like to kill everything that they see. Um, we even have some ways to help you improve your improvising. Like sometimes your players might catch you off guard, and you have to improvise like a solution. Um, or maybe even your players have like a hard railroad, and you can't get them back on track. We even are thinking about talking about a little bit about descriptions of like maybe combat or like just terrain, looks of characters, um how you can use that to your advantage as a DM also. And the last thing that we want to talk about is like unique fighting mechanics, um to make battles a little bit more interesting for you and your players. So let's start off with running a milestone or AXP based campaign.
Lead us off, Mikey. And just a quick thing, for those of you that were here for the last time, we're, I think, aiming for a similar format. One of us is going to kind of take the lead on each of these individual topics, give an opening statement, talk a little bit about, the meat and potatoes of it, at which point we'll, throw to a little bit more of a roundtable discussion, where if you guys have questions, toss them on out.
Yeah. I do believe I was not going to be the one who's going to lead off milestone and AXP,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I'm
that was
more
Saviour.
than
That was Saviour. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I forgot I lambasted him. Go ahead, Saviour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So looking at a milestone or an EXP campaign, this would be the first thing that you decide on whenever you're starting up a campaign. Each one is a very viable way of running your campaign, and it comes down to your preference on which one you would like. Some pros and cons for each is kind of what we're going to be talking about for these here. And I can go ahead and list off a few for both, actually. For Milestone, you're able to keep your party at a specific power level for whichever area that they are going to into your campaign. So if your campaign is one to where it is more segmented and it's like story driven, so they go to town A and then they travel to town B, it's like during that time you can scale your different areas to the level of your party and you get to control that level of your party basically. So it's easier in some cases to balance around, but it's also it leaves less opportunities to for the party to kind of improvise where they're going basically. um for XP, it's it gives the players the like basically the chance to see how close they are to leveling up, and it kind of like gets them excited basically as to like, oh, we're about to level up, we're about to get this, instead of them being in the dark about when they're going to level. um with XP, it is a bit more work to track because as a DM, you have to scale your fights according to your party's power, and then you have to kind of scale the XP and how you feel certain monsters should have more or should have less based on however you create them.
Cool.
Now, for EXP, there are some like tools that are out there online, like D&D Beyond. If you're a subscriber, I do believe, it allows you to have this encounter builder where you can it will actually calculate all the encounters for you. There's also in the player's handbook, or I think it's Dungeon Master's Guide, to be honest. There's also a kind of like a table that you could follow to calculating EXP for various CRs, because if you add so many mobs to an encounter, it actually increases the EXP gain of the whole encounter. Um, so there's all kinds of different ways to track EXP, but I do have to agree. Um, in a personal sense, I do like Milestone just because I do think it's better for open world campaigns to where your party can kind of like go where they want when they want, and use a DM could be like, they did pretty good this time. I'm gonna give them a level. But I'm partially biased to it, and I think we all are because we're all currently running Milestone campaigns.
No, there's no bias here, Mikey. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do
Can't
you
you? Here's a question. Can't you just say that when you gain experience, you only get about 25% of it instead of 100?
mean? So I can touch on that a little bit. So the way that I do things is kind of a little bit of a hybrid between the two. I think I 100% agree with everything Saviour and Mikey said there about Milestone having huge pros in terms of being kind of easier to keep track of, that keeps everybody at the same level, and as Mikey was saying, it's very good for an open world. Um, what I do is a little bit different. It From the outside looking in as a player in my campaign, I just tell them they're in Milestone because they effectively are. Um, but I think you can create your own more simplified of an EXP system behind the scenes, which is what I do. Um, and in that version, Final Dash, instead of being like, well, their base value is this much, but I feel like it should be less. Like for someone like me who homebrews a lot of my monsters and all that stuff, and who tries to get a good focus on RP in the campaign, those are both things I want to keep in mind in terms of progression. So I have my own ticker behind the scenes that I add to as I see necessary, where I know the encounters going in. I say, like, I judge their value to be about this much, and then I can add on to it for things like, well, the party RP'd really well today, so they should take a little bit more here. And you can do that same thing with a traditional XP system. Um, but I think that it's very possible to create your own highly customizable system that can be pretty simple, right? Like the numbers in XP get pretty big. Not that like, oh, big numbers are scary, but like you can create a simplified version. The one that I do is out of 100, where at every level I have prepared certain things that'll net them this much, and then things that they do that surprise me as the DM, or show somebody's huge commitment to how they play their character, or two characters that RP really well together have still the opportunity for me to just be like, ah, that was really good, give them 5 more.
Can you farm towns? Let's say you do a mass murder just to get a quick XP.
So
That is where I think we get
well,
into murder
I think we're
hoboing.
going to talk about murder hoboing in a little bit. But that's something where if you have your own system, right, you can kind of manage a little bit more, right? If you're locked into the EXP system and you're like, no, 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 they kill, a peasant, that's like 5 XP, which means everyone they do is 5 XP. If you're doing your own system, you could be like, well, let's think about this reasonably, right? And see, one of the things Mikey brought up last session is, or last time we had one of these discussions, is like, if you as the DM can't explain why something is the way it is, you might need to think about it and reevaluate it a little bit. And I think it was a very, very prescient point. So I think it would be reasonable for you as the DM, if you've got your own system, to be like, look, EXP represents someone, getting, facing hard challenges that, put them to the test, and, they cause their abilities and their skills to excel and get better. Um, as the DM with your own system, if they're just like, okay, well, let's slaughter 15,000 peasants and just level up, you could be like, well, you know, I'm going to put in a system where they get diminishing returns on something like that. Because if you're just like, well, we just wander around killing things that like are just like easy mode, right? That doesn't really help you as a character. So if you allow for flexibility in your system, you can allow for things like that where you're like, well, I don't want my party just like farming easy stuff. So we put in a system where we have, diminishing returns on, murder hoboing.
Is it possible to add an experience on stats instead of having numbers? You just add stat. The player has to do something just to get that extra boost on the intelligence or strength.
I mean, yeah, if you wanted to customize your own system to that extent, you could. One thing I would caution as a DM, right? 5e isn't the most complicated game in the world, or even of all tabletop gaming games, but it is still a pretty complex game and one that can be a little bit intimidating to a newer player. If you have newer players going into a game that has like 15,000 house rules and like how you level up and everything is different, I feel like if you're doing something like that with new players, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot from the start. What do you think, Mikey and Saviour?
I really think that like 5e as its core base is a very simple game, and that's what Wizards of the Coast wanted. If you wanted a more complex game, I would actually recommend looking into different RPGs
Yeah,
like
Dungeon World,
Pathfinder,
Pathfinder,
Dungeon
Dungeon World.
World. There's a bunch of others that are a lot more complex and allows for more flexibility than 5e. Now, 5e, don't get me wrong, you can be a little bit flexible with it, but it has a little bit less flexibility in the fact that like there's a few things that are really like strict and stern, like kind of like how the leveling up system works and such like that. Like I know in Pathfinder, if you wanted to, all you have to do is just take a certain feat, and you're just suddenly that good in that certain thing. Well, 5e doesn't really give that certain that full like feel, because like in Pathfinder, if you wanted to be a real good archer, but let's say you're just a plain fighter or something like that, and you didn't want to go into like ranger, all you have to do is pick up a feat, and then you could be more like a ranger. Um, and that's one thing about 5e and Pathfinder, um, that's very different, and a lot of people like set them off. But Pathfinder, the rules are very complex, and that's one thing that I like about 5e. The rules are so simplistic. Even just like someone right off the
Can
get go
confirm. I
pick it up.
started my DMing with Pathfinder. It is a little crazy at times.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's a good point, right? If you're looking for something with like maybe a little bit of a deeper system, there are games that offer that. Um, but it's worth, and again, one of the huge things we talked about last time, making sure you and your players are on the same page. If you go to them before your campaign, right, and you're going to be like, we're going to be playing a heavily modified version of 5e that has some stuff taken away, some stuff added, blah 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 blah. It is worth, if that's something you want to do, A, making sure all your players know that, and B, making a very clear and a concise a list of what's different as possible and making that available to them so that everybody knows what's going on and what the changes are when they go into like making a character and all that stuff.
Another thing we should talk about that Indy just
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, if let's say a PC dies, right? And you're running an EXP is usually a thing that happens. I've been in both, where the DM like literally resets you to level 1. That saw, and it's a brutalizing campaign. But my DM projected that that's how the campaign was going to be ran, and it was fun. But like, it still sucked in the moment. It's like, oh, I'm level 10. Oh no, I'm back to level 1 now. Great. And it's kind of cool, but the way what I do is when I have EXP is that I just, yeah, you're at whatever the party's EXP level is. You're at the same EXP, bring in your new character. You
Yeah.
died. Especially if it's a PvP. Um I don't like players killing players personally, but I've been known to just sit back, and as long as it's warranted, I
But you
don't
also
kill
play with
the
Joey, so like it's bound to happen at some
person.
point,
Yeah,
you know.
right.
So at
I
some
mean,
point you're resigned to the inevitability of it all, Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
I think I 100% agree. I mean, if in a campaign that I would run, I would never have a reset people to level 1. Again, that's a totally viable way if you talk to your party and you're like, this is how they're doing it, and they're all down. More power to you. Um, I feel like you run into huge problems though if you, especially if you're higher level, right? Like, let's say that you are even level 5, right? Nothing crazy, but pretty high. Getting up there, and you reset someone to level 1. You're gonna have a few sessions where that level 1 character, now they will level up fast, is worthless. Just the way that power scales in 5e, like they're pretty much worthless, and that just feels to me antithetical to what you're going for in D&D, which is in an ideal world, right? Every session has something for every player. Um and if so, it makes combat very difficult to do if you've got like let's balance an encounter around, here's a monster that is a little bit of a threat to this level 5 character, and with a crit can one tap a level 1 character, right? You can't really balance around that because it's all about the positioning and who gets attacked, right? And you could easily trap a level 1 character in a cycle of getting like screwed where they're like, well, I'm going into all these counters that my character isn't ready for. They're just getting one tapped, and like that's not fun. As well as like your higher level characters, and we'll probably get into this more in the next topic, which is metagaming, right? If you know that you're at level 10 and you're gonna have to reset to level 1, might be like, oh shit, like I really don't want my character to die because I know about that. Like I'm gonna play extra defensively, like, which is not what you want your characters doing. You want your characters thinking, what would my character do here? Not like, oh, I don't really want to lose my character, so I'll always take the defensive choice. Like, I think it's doable, but as Mikey was saying, there's a lot more variables and it can get dicey very quickly.
I think that concludes our EXP versus Milestone. Metagaming. I do believe ReVolt, you wanted to take over metagaming, or is it me?
I thought it was you.
Okay. So metagaming, to give you guys like for those who don't know what metagaming is, it's basically taking something you as a player, knowledge you as a player know, but your character doesn't know, and implementing it as your character already knows it. So, a prime example would be like, let's say your character, has no idea anything about a ancient red dragon, let's just say. And other than it's a fucking dragon, right? And dragons are terrifying. But you as a player know that the ancient red dragon has this very powerful breath weapon that can has to recharge on a dice roll. On top of that, it has legendary actions and all this stuff. Um, that suddenly ruins the experience for players who actually don't know that stuff. They don't get to experience it going in, be like, oh, what are we fighting here? And for people who've never played that or fight against it before, it just ruins that experience for it. And maybe your DM might have like a little special additive onto it. And then you just metagaming it just kind of like ruins the whole flow for your DM. And like another thing that DMs can do to metagame, and I've had this done to me in the past, and my experience as a player when I found my DM was metagaming was that I went and talked to him about it. I was being very sneaky as a rogue, and I thought I got away with stealing some gemstones, and all of a sudden these basic guards just kind of came out of nowhere and arrested me. And I used magic. I had our wizard turn me invisible, and I should have got away scotch free. And when I approached my DM, he had no solid reasoning why those guards arrested me. He's just like, I didn't want you to steal that. And I was just like, well, that's kind of like the point of the game, like I'm trying to do things out of the blue, and as a DM you want to stray away from metagaming um as best as you can. is you want your players to stray away from it. You as a DM also has to stray away from it too. Because it's a two-way road. What do you say, ReVolt and Saviour?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree on what you're saying, where it's a two-way road. Metagaming can be as small as things like things that happen in every D&D game, which is like people talking in a combat, out of combat, about like, ooh, well, we could do this and do this and this. And I think that that's a very like, I don't like a ton of it, but it's a very light to acceptable level of metagaming that I've seen in all of our campaigns. Like most of the time, you allow a little bit of, right? Like you can chalk it up to like, well, we battle strategize, so this is the equivalent of that. Um, or it can go up to as large as something being like somebody deliberately. So let's say in one of my campaigns right now, right? One of my players who's playing a warlock has gotten a mission from or a directive from his patron to do something that's a little bit less than what his party would be okay with. And what I'm enjoying about that is that my other players aren't being like, "What are you doing, warlock? Like, what's going on?" Right? Like they didn't get a in there and figure it out, and so they're playing it out in character as if they have no idea, right? But in a world where people are metagaming really hard, they could be like, oh well, like we're gonna be like super suspicious towards them, even though like in character they shouldn't know. um and I think one of the things that you can do, because Mikey was saying like you don't want your DM to just be like, well, these guys just know because they know, but you can set a standard, right? Let's say that your party sets the standard in terms of like how they play and how they make decisions. That's a little bit iffy, where it's like, well, it seems like it might be a little metagamey, but like there's something there. Then you can just apply that same standard, right? If it's very, very easy for the party to kind of like pick up on those outside things, then maybe it's again not like implausibly, but a little bit easier for your whoever's looking into your party to pick up on something, right? Like you gotta kind of feel it out and judge the way that things are going, because at the end of the day, I don't think metagaming is really a question of like it's either metagaming or there's no metagaming. It's kind of a gray area, and it's about kind of finding a balance there. Do you have any thoughts on that, Savior?
To kind of sum up what all of y'all have just been saying, don't be an asshole. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
No.
I mean, I like that.
On a serious note, though, all of the stuff that y'all have said is great, and to even say like go a bit further, right? Conversations between two people like that are in private, uh, even though everybody can hear the conversation, the you have to you kind of have to like dissociate yourself from the table and think about what your character knows. You have to like get into the thought process and the ideology of what your character is and who they are, instead of what you hear around the table. So like basically, if your character isn't a part of a conversation is somewhere else, like let's say two people go up to or like to a bedroom in a tavern, and they're like drinking and talking, and everybody else is in the bar. If your character isn't there, I mean, yeah, you as a player hear it, but your character doesn't. Just don't be an asshole. Respect that other people are trying to do things, and just have fun with it.
and I feel like that becomes even more complicated when DMing, right? Because obviously,
Yes.
as the DM, you're super aware of everything going on in the game. I mean, you're the architect and kind of the guy who's holding it all together. So obviously, you got an idea of what's going on. But you have to bear in mind, and this is a difficult thing to do when you're playing different characters. What does this character know, right? Not what do I as the DM know, because I know everything. What does Boris the shopkeep know about like who might have done the thefts recently, right? So stuff like that.
And one thing that I can that helps out both player and DM of keeping track of that is just notes, solid notes. Be like, yeah, I know that the Goblin King is a tyrant and an asshole. I heard this from a local shopkeeper. All right, well, that's pretty good. And then as a DM, you could be like, oh, well, my local shopkeeper has heard from probably like the newspaper or the bards that come through the town, that there is this bandit group named whatever your party's name is, and he has like a broad description of what the party looks like, and maybe he could just immediately just be hostile to that just right from the get-go, and that's how you stop metagaming right there, because you can explain uh your reasoning. Like, yeah, that's how my person knows. If you can't explain it, you shouldn't do it in as a player or a DM. That's a pretty good general rule of thumb, and you will never be caught metagaming,
Yeah.
because if you can't explain it, don't do it.
And also both as a like you said, as a DM and as a player, being willing to like keep yourself honest, right? Because I'll be honest, there are times when I'm like, oh, I really want to say something, and I can make like an argument for maybe why I would say or do something, but like keep yourself honest, right? If it's a stretch, just be like, yeah, it's a stretch, fair enough. And trying to hold similar standards, right? Be like, well, if I would think that this might be a little bit BS if somebody else did it, I can't really just like go for it myself because again, it goes back to what Saviour's saying, don't be an asshole.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I just got back from work. What did I miss? I wanted to join.
So I got good news for you. We have discussed only the
EXP versus Milestone.
only EXP and metagaming, and also I'm recording this just so you know as well, and I'll probably throw it up on my like random video having YouTube channel, so you can always go back and catch anything that you missed.
Workshop for new players?
So we're
New
talking,
players and DMs.
yeah, it's
Even
focusing a lot on the DM stuff, but most of everything we talk about, since you can't have one without the other, is pretty applicable to both. So, we feel good about metagaming topic, or are we ready to move on, or does anybody have any extra questions, or? I think that's a no. We'll move on. And our next topic is a more GM centric one: unmotivated players. And actually, no, I take it back. This is a super both interested one. If anyone's ever DM'd, right, they've probably had an experience where they, you need to be able to read the room a little bit, and sometimes you can tell somebody's not feeling it, and maybe it's a one-off night, maybe it isn't. But while not necessarily like an indication that you're doing something wrong, sometimes a player just has having like an off night, they're not really getting into it. It's always something to take note of. And this goes back to something we've talked about many, 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 many times at this point, which is communication with your players, right? Being able to recognize that a player is demotivated. Are they not really RPing enough? Does a situation that you think their character might care about come up, but they don't really interact with it? Does it seem like they're just kind of going through the motions? All these are indications that you might have a player that's not really feeling it right now. Now, again, that is not a sign that you're just like a bad DM or you're doing something wrong, right? That can happen for a variety of reasons. But the good news is that as long as we keep the focus on solutions and how to get everybody involved, it's easy to get yourself into a good spot. Now, for me personally, the way that I like to deal with that is if I see it as a thing, talking to that player. So I can give an example with Saviour. We were talking about it last night, right? Last summer when Saviour started his new job, he was kind of checked out. And I don't mean this to be rude or mean at all. He was kind of checked out because he just started like his new job. He was like playing into the night when he had gotten up at 5 a.m. and worked for 10 hours or whatever. And so I think I talked to him at one point, and we got to that, and we made the adjustments as needed. So I think communication is always important because I don't blame him, right? He was exhausted, and he wasn't feeling his best when he was playing, and that happens to everybody. But there's still solutions you can seek. Primarily, how do I rehook this player, right? What story hooks can I use? What thing can I put that maybe puts their character for a side plot of a session at the forefront. Anything I can do to re-engage them. Maybe I challenge their relationship with a known faction or one of the or an allied player in some way where it's like, ooh, now I'm really getting back into it. Um, so I think the keys there are recognition, communication, and then hooking them back in. Mikey, Saviour, what do you guys think on that topic?
One thing that I love to do as a DM is I like to look at my players' backstories, right? And I've had backstories that were given to me like novel size, and then I have backstories that are like 3 or 4 sentences. I've even had players that haven't given me any backstory, and I've had to like kind of like make one as I go.
Coax it out of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And
Have you?
one thing that I love to do is when I have an unmotivated player is I like to look at their backstory and I like to, okay, so he's got such and such backstory because maybe he's he was a paladin order man because he's a paladin, and then maybe he was dishonorably discharged, and I look why he was dishonorably discharged, and then I try and figure out a way to link that to the party. If he was dishonorably discharged, maybe I'll throw in some paladins that knew him from before in the military, and they make fun of him and pick on him and pick on him, and then suddenly that player, they're gonna get emotionally tied. They're gonna get frustrated. They're gonna get angry, and that's what you want them to do. That will suddenly pique their interest because now they're gonna be like, these motherfuckers, I want to kill them now, or I want to beat their asses. I want to do better. They start focusing on your campaign. You have to play with your players' emotions a little bit to keep them interested, because it can't always be like, yeah, this is always here. You got to have them have like a plot. That's why if you ever like see like good writers or even good movies, they always have like a good plot that keeps you interested in watching it and continuing on. And that's what you want to do as a DM. You are a storyteller. You want to tell the story. And you need to keep your players interested in the story by getting them with emotional hook. Maybe they fall in love with like an NPC, like your party just adores an NPC, and then you just suddenly they get captured or arrested, and then suddenly your players are interested why they got arrested. You can do a various stuff like that. I know ReVolt in the past has Saviour had a character named Dave, and Dave did something very
Dave did a
not
bad
so
thing.
good. Yeah, he
Dave
did
did
a
a bad
very, very
thing,
bad thing. And
and I pulled
I
his
ended up
faction into it. Yeah.
yeah, I ended up missing a session that he ended up doing that bad thing, and normally my character was like the voice of reason to Dave at the time for whatever fucking reason. But I was the voice of reason, and I had to miss the session due to the fact that I had work or something like that. I don't remember at the time, but it was probably work. Um, and I came back, and Dave was in jail. And so like me, I was always coming in exhausted, and I'm like, wait, my best friend just is in jail. And so then I had this whole plot and scheme of how am I gonna break my best friend out of jail? Like
Yeah, we did a whole
I
mini session for that, didn't we?
yeah.
Yeah.
And like that brought my curiosity. It remotivated me as a player, even though I was exhausted from just working like 7 days a week and such. But it was a really nice move on ReVolt because like I was very demotivated. Not the fact that I didn't find his campaign interested. It's I was just physically exhausted.
And it's hard to be
That
into anything when you're just beat, yeah.
hmm And so like that was a really good move on ReVolt's thing by taking kind of like an improvised way of going about it. He killed two birds with one stone, even though I don't think he intentionally did it. But I'm gonna go with it because Revolt's a great DM.
Totally on purpose, as everything good that I do is,
Um,
Totally on purpose.
yeah, but that's another way you can do it, especially if you find that you have two players that are friends. Maybe you throw in counters that strain their relationship. and it'll get those two players really interested. The primary thing that most players get unmotivated by is probably just life. Life literally just it happens. You have to play sessions and campaigns for long periods of time, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And there's a few things that your players can do. You can even talk to other players to try and help you out. I've done that in the past. Like I've used Joey to help me keep other players motivated. I've asked him to kind of like give me a little bit of things, some role play solutions. And then I've also just kind of did it on my own. Like you're not by yourself as the DM. Your players want to help you build a story. That's why they're playing with you as their DM. They would find a new DM if they didn't think you were good enough for it. Do you want to add anything, Saviour?
Yeah, tell us about how you got kicked out of the army, Saviour.
That's a great story, is it not?
I'm motivated to feel it, Saviour. You lost your job, Saviour.
True.
That's in
But
game,
no,
not in real life. Saviour isn't in the army. He's too weak.
very true. No, so I just really all I can kind of say about it is just kind of speaking from experience, right? So ReVolt had brought up how previously there were like there was a time where just basically life caught up, and I was exhausted, and we got to see glimpses of angry Savior, and nobody likes angry.
I believe we
Savior.
call him Grumpy Boy Saviour, but
Yeah, Grumpy Boy Savior. Nobody likes Grumpy Boy Savior, but just communicate. If life is kind of like caught up to you and you're fucking exhausted, just communicate with your DM. Be like, hey, yeah, like let me take a break. Like I'm not feeling like the greatest.
yeah.
Go from there.
Or
Um,
and by a break, right? I'm assuming what we mean by that, just to clarify, is like maybe a session or two where like your character
mhm,
doesn't have to take the lead in RP and stuff like that, right? Because sometimes, and I know this has happened with me, right? If I'm like feeling down or I'm feeling tired or any of that, right? It's nice to have a session where it's like, okay, like somebody else is going to carry the RP. I can be along for the ride. I can still enjoy the story because I'm still a part of it, but like in my personal state of like I'm not feeling things right now, right? I can still be a part of what's happening. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
perfect. Yeah, that's a great point. Um, and from a DM's perspective, if you're trying to get that player like remotivated and trying to get him to or her, to participate and just kind of like enjoy the world that they're being played in. Just there's a lot like what Mikey was going off of. You can go off of their backstory. You can and like if they didn't give you a lot, for a backstory, then you can just introduce new NPCs that have some emotional tie to these people. Uh, the only thing that I kind of disagreed with with what Mikey was saying is that yes, as a DM, you're a storyteller, but at the same time, everybody in the campaign is writing the exact same story along with you. Whatever is being done is you're creating a story together. The DM gives you the setting and the players give you the plot basically as to what's going on and what's happening. So just trying to find like that middle ground for I believe earlier we were saying it's like a give and take between players and DMs.
Yeah,
So just trying to find that middle ground to where both sides can see what the other is doing is what all DMs are, I believe, are aiming for.
yeah. And from my final note on this topic, um, just be to touch on something else very quickly, and that's unmotivated players slash unmotivated players being DM inclusive. Let's say I don't do it often, but if I know I'm not feeling it, I will cancel my session. And I know Mikey's done it, and I know I did it in Shadows like last week. I've done it in other Shadows before. I think that that's always the best bet. Knowing yourself as the DM, you cannot go into a session feeling like shit, feeling down, and DM to your best capacity. You can do it, and you might even be able to do it well, depending on the circumstances. But if you're really just feeling like ass, you do both your players and yourself a service by knowing yourself well enough to be like, look, if I go in tonight, I'm exhausted and my attitude isn't the greatest, right? It's likely to reflect itself in the game. It is. So just being conscientious of that and having a group and knowing yourself well enough to be like, look, it doesn't make sense tonight.
Exactly.
Got anything else, Mikey?
No. I think it's good. I actually have to agree with Saviour's counterpoint though.
I
With
don't think it was a
disagreeing with,
counterpoint. I listened to both of you, and I'm pretty
disagreeing
sure
with
you're saying
you.
the same thing.
Yeah. Disagreeing with me slightly is what I think he said, but
But I'm agreeing with both of you. So how do you? What do you agree with me, or you agree with him then?
I agree with both. How do you like them apples?
That's cheating. That's my move. You
No,
beasted.
I was
You
still your
beasted.
move.
He's not agreeing with them.
No, I guess not.
I've been had.
Final dash breaking us all. Oh goodness, guys. GG. Well played.
True.
I know, right? So I think we should go on to the next topic. Which kind of fits well with the story that we told of Dave, how he got arrested.
I love
That
how
was
Dave was the
to
one.
be fair.
I was
To
gonna
be
say,
fair. To be fair. This was. I'm gonna argue this is a little different because this one, and you weren't there for that, so you didn't hear. It was more like it was. This was less a murder hobo decision and more a series of consecutively horrible decisions. To be honest. It
yeah.
was less
And
like, all right, let's just like kill him because fuck him, and more just like a
All right,
series of
what about
very,
the other
very
session
poor
that I
decision
missed
making.
that they killed like 40 civilians? How
That
revolt
one was
that
that one fits. Yeah, that one definitely
that one
fits.
fits, and that one was not Dave because
That one
Dave
was
was trying to
that was
defuse the
Stalix. Of
situation.
course, it was the French Canadian. Of course, it was. But anyway,
and he's not here to defend himself.
exactly.
Again,
That's why
another
we can
session I
strike.
missed.
We can
My
strike with
teammate,
impunity.
I missed
Anyway,
another session, and fucking, I hear that a bunch of people died, and I'm like, what the hell? But let's say you have you have players that just like kill, kill, kill. Killing is our answer. Um, as that is a potential answer for players. I mean, it's a simple solution. It's a fantasy world. It's they don't really have to fully experience the consequences of murder, really, because like in real life, you go to jail for life, man. You're done for just murder. And
unless
like
it's of a French Canadian.
I'm not gonna warrant anything of the sorts.
Mikey's like, I could not comment. The views of ReVolt do not reflect the views of Mikey.
But what if
Uh,
you're trying real life and
I'm
you
just kidding.
recurrent
I love you, French
for person
Canadians.
that can kill?
And like, there's a certain like justice that you can do in like letting a little bit of murder hoboing to get away, just because like your players are trying to relieve some stress and other things. But like, there's also a point where you have to like step your foot down and be like, no, this is the line. And like, as Final said earlier for the EXP thing is, what if your players want to just like kill a whole city of civilians? And like, and they probably could. I'm not gonna lie. Your players probably could do that. 100%. Players become very powerful, almost like demigod-like, and especially when they get higher levels, they become very powerful, and they could eradicate cities together. And you as a dungeon master, you have to be prepared for that. And there's a lot of things that you can do to stop murder hoboing. First off, you can talk with your players. I mean, sometimes after they kill one person, just even if it was by mistake, um it might spiral out of control really quickly. Even they might even have bad decision making in the heat of the moment, especially if they get caught up in, like, let's say an angry mob, you know, right in their face. They might make a rash decision that causes a lot of civilians to die, maybe. Or maybe they just had a disagreement with an NPC and they didn't want to deal with it, so they just killed them. That's also another thing. One thing you can do is add actual consequences to it. Like, one thing I know Revolt has done in the past is, if we go on like a murder hoboing spree, the players suddenly lose reputation with very powerful NPCs that they actually really needed to accomplish things, or they like lost money, or they lost like rewards, and that like hurt them in the hurt the players in the end, and it made them think twice about murder hoboing again in the future, which is things you can do as a DM. Add an actual consequence. Maybe it doesn't stop them from getting a higher reward. Maybe it affects them by maybe that NPC that they killed, they were supposed to be someone who stopped a dragon from assaulting a town. Now the players have to stop this dragon from assaulting this town. You add different things for them to kind of like find as a consequence for just randomly killing people, because there's lots of ways you can do it. You guys want to take over?
Throw to Saviour.
Um, yeah, I mean, murder hobos, just speaking a little bit from experience.
Maybe like a little bit. Just a little baby bit.
just a little bit, you know. Um, yeah, it can either just be like a stress reliever, as Mikey was saying, or it could just be like a bunch of very, very, very poor decisions back to back to back to back. To deal with it, if it's a repetitive thing that like keeps happening over and over and over again, um, I feel like actually giving consequence, like what Mikey was saying, to the actions is the best bet. Um, so I haven't had to deal with this in the campaign that I'm running currently, but if it was to happen, uh, there are rules, regulations, and laws in place to basically pass on judgment to whatever may or may not happen. I feel like that's and like whether it be prison time, fines, or even some, if it's bad enough, executions. Um, but just as a DM, having multiple different ways of dealing with, and like, I don't want to say passing judgment because you don't always have to, but just like kind of avoiding murder hoboing. It's most likely in your best interest to have or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah. And what Indy was just saying is, yeah, it's, let's say you have like a paladin or a cleric, who have gone through, and it's like, yeah, no, like worse, and this more so would be for paladins. It's, they take an oath to do something, and if they are partaking in murder hoboing, that could break their oath, and then you have to get into the whole aspect of, I'm a paladin that has broken my oath, so I therefore, you have to go through a whole class change, subclass change really, because you go from, let's say, an oath of vengeance to, you're now an oath breaker, and you have to figure out how you're going to, one, either cope with it, or two, attempt to fix it. So yeah, that's
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback there because I think Indy's question is absolutely brilliant. He says an opinion could be to let the party become villains if they murder hobo enough, and I think that that's a great, great, great point. Um, Again, obviously, Mikey and Saviour have covered it very well, with the primary consideration being actions, consequences. We do this. Maybe these guys don't like us that much anymore because what do you know? If you like run around killing people like crazy people, people don't like you. You might lose out on having a job. You might lose out on an ally. You might lose out on a reward. But what Indy is positing there, I think, is super, 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 super smart, right? And that's the concept of like, all right, if you make your bed, you got to sleep in it, right? If your party is going to go down that path, You don't have to be like, look, guys, like you can let them do it. Let them play how they want to play, and let the story become what it becomes there, right? Maybe they start out the campaign like, oh, we're kind of like the good guys, and we do this, and oh, we slaughtered that guy, and oh, we committed this horrible act, and oh, we killed this guy too, right? Which is easy to fall into because in video games and in tabletop games, right? It's not like there's consequences there, right? So it's easy to just be like, well, let's min max, let's the guy that gave us the job, let's kill him and get the items back too, as well as the money. Um, Maybe your party becomes the villains, whether they want to or not, right? If they're at the end of the day, right, you create the story together, and if what they give you is that they're villains, then start treating them like villains. Start having the campaign revolve around the fact that, oh, they may have thought they were the good guys, but they're not anymore. Because at the end of the day, if you operate in like a let's min max, let's do all this, um, the world around you will react accordingly. Factions won't like you. People won't want to work with you. Maybe cities or groups will be outright hostile towards you, which again is still on the idea of actions and consequences. But I like Indy's thought there, where it's like, yeah, you just run with it. Like if they're gonna act like bad guys, then yeah, they're bad guys. What does the campaign become then? Because I mean, to me, that question has a lot of very interesting follow through.
I actually like that ideology. I kind of do something similar um to it. Maybe not to like the full extent ReVolt says, but yeah, I mean, I have like various people that just will actually just treat my party hostilely. Just they've just heard about them. And then suddenly my party is like they walk into a city and they're already the guards are trying to arrest and kill them. And
Yeah.
they'll be like, well, I don't even know these guys. I've never even been to the city. And I'm already being attempted to be arrested. You know? And stuff like that is very powerful, and it shows your party members like a consequence of murder hoboing. And it gives you as a DM a lot more control on the table. Because now your party is going to either roll with what you just gave them, or they're going to be like, they're going to try and fix their mistakes.
And you can even turn that into like a redemption arc, right? Which is another thing to like bait your guys in. Let's say that you have a party that wants to be like vaguely good guys and they fall into the kind of murder hobo trap a little bit, right? At that point, you bring them from, a group that's like, well, we are staunchly the good guys and we know it and everybody knows it and blah, 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 to like, look, like we're a party that wants to play good characters. And now we know for sure that we're not getting away with everything, with anything. We have to prove ourselves. We have to prove our good intentions, and like making that hard for them, put obstacles, barriers in their way because of what they've done, right? All that stuff. Make it possible for them, but be like, look, you did this, so now you have to kind of if you lost this, if you lost 2 reputation with this faction because you know killed someone that they were friendly with, yeah, you don't just get away with that. You have to get it back if you want to work with them. You have to reprove yourself. And I think that murder hoboing, it all comes down to action consequence, and you can just use it as a story hook and as a learning
Um,
experience to your players.
One thing that I have done myself, sort of recently is I was dealing with my players being heavy murder hobos, and one thing that I did was they their intentions were very good. One of them, I had some goblins be basically mob thugs, and they were just basically be like, "We need your security payment right now to a local."
Did I drop here or did Mikey? I I think it was me.
One didn't really get away. He kind of got caught outside and killed, but the barkeeper ended up out of just straight fear from the mob boss told on my players, and it became a whole war um that my players had to suddenly fix, and one of them almost got beheaded by the king because the king didn't want to have a war against the mob, you know. And if you do a little research on like various history, it doesn't even have to be medieval history. You can even add like kind of like more recent modern history. One thing I like to do is I looked into like prohibition with Al Capone. Government officials would just be like, I don't want to fuck with him, man. I'm just not gonna fuck with him. And I did the same thing with a king, you know. And doing stuff like that and implementing it and using those kind of consequences to your party makes them suddenly realize, oh shit, I fucked up. And now that one player that was murder hoboing, they are the most lawful character on my party.
Yeah.
You
So
know, and
I
it
th-
worked.
I think that covers murder hobos. Does anybody have any questions about that topic? Cool. So let's lead into how to improvise. I think Mikey, you know what I want to talk about. So you were gonna talk about like the first part of it. I was gonna take the second. I'm also gonna run to the bathroom real quick. So go ahead and take us away. They'll still be able to hear you in the video and all that. And I'll be right back. And go for it, Mikey.
You hear this, guys? Like, I gotta take over for the master here. Um, Even though I think I'm the master of improvising out of the three of us, because I literally don't do any prep for any of my sessions. But, so improvising. The best way to improvise is always have a core to start on. And what I mean by like a core is it could be something as simple as like, hey, I have character sheets for every NPC, and I have a rough idea how they all kind of like want to like roll with the world. To I have this whole world built out, and that I can work with it. Um, it can be super simple or it can be super complex. As long as you have a base line that you can kind of like work around, and it allows you to improvise, because like it one thing that I'm very known for is I have my world and it actually like functions like a full, like it feels alive. It works, it develops, it interacts based with my players, and I always make sure I tell my players like the world is going to interact with whatever you do and it's still going to do its own thing. And like I said with the mob encounter, like the king was terrified of what the mob could do from what my players did. Like the mob is still a pressing thing. And I kind of improvised that thing, just to kind of like I improvised to see if I could stop the murder hobo. It was an improvisation that I made, but I already had a basis to work around. That would be my biggest like, this will help you out the most if you have that improvise. Just you can make anything on the fly as long as you have a basis to work on. Another thing I did was one of my players, I found that they weren't really like role playing, they weren't participating in my sessions. And one thing I did is I was just like, oh, I know the perfect NPC for this, but they're on the other side of the world. Well, that's no big deal. I have them do that later. I took that NPC and I put them into the same area that my players were in, and then had that NPC roleplay with that one player. And then suddenly, that player just became super interactive with my story, which is a really nice thing that you could do. But I don't think ReVolt's still here.
No,
Saviour,
I'm
you
here.
got
I'm
anything?
back.
Oh, okay.
Savior, no, go ahead, Savior. Because I think my stuff's a little different. So go ahead, Savior.
Okay. So when it comes to improvising, you gotta be flexible as a DM. You have to be able to take what your players are giving you and roll with it. Like for instance, let's say that you have an encounter planned out, right? And your players go about the encounter a different way than what you thought it was going to go, right? You have to be able to take what your players are giving you and be able to roll with it and like play it out how it would be played out in that situation, which this goes with the kind of like the metagaming from a DM's perspective. because it's difficult to try to figure out what your players are going to do in every single given moment. And so you have to be able to, as a DM, not metagame the like the encounters. In like if you're or basically what I'm trying to say is if your players come up with a creative solution to a problem that you thought there were only like a set number of resolutions to, don't punish them for it. You basically kind of have to like give them props for it. Basically, at the end of the day,
You kind of improvise around it. You don't want to force your players into doing things because like being forced into doing something that you really try to avoid is probably one of the most demoralizing thing as a player. You just feel like, wow, I did all this work, and it's like, yeah, my DM just said, fuck this. You're doing this, you know. And it's like, oh well, okay, that's cool, I guess. I mean, I don't really have any control on the story, or what happens around me, which, that sucks and all, but like, you got to give your players kind of like a little bit of control. It's a give and take relationship with the DM and their players. Um and so that's why I say improvising is probably one of the hardest things to master as a DM. Just because the fact that you have to be able to be willing to give and to take from what your players give you. ReVolt.
Yeah, I absolutely love everything that you guys have said. That's my first point. Um, one thing that I would add is not being afraid to be like, I'm not ready for that. And what I mean by that is like, let's say that your party comes up with like this side idea that's like crazy and could be really really cool, and like it came out of left field, nobody saw it coming, and this is what we're gonna do. This is the plan. Being like, all right, guys, like I didn't see that coming at all. Let's we're gonna call it intermission. We'll take 10 minutes. Let me think about this a little bit, and then we'll get into it. Right? That's a totally acceptable thing to do as a DM. Your players are gonna throw you curveballs because you, as the DM, cannot possibly prepare for the creativity of 4 to 6 players. Right? You're just not going to be able to. Um, Now, if it's something small, right, you can improvise something on the spot, you can make it work, but not being afraid to be like, well, this isn't a path I thought about much. Maybe we take a brief intermission, I think about it, I prepare something, and we go with it. Because at that point, it's best for the players because you, as the DM, are more prepared for what you're going into. And it's cool for the players because they can be like, whoa, 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 look how creatively I'm thinking. Like, we didn't even consider this. Now let's play it out. Let's see what happens. Um, I think that that's like it's super important as a DM to not have, and I know this because this is hard for me and Mikey. Mikey and I are both very egotistical people. Um, it's hard not to have an ego. You have to be like you have to be willing to say, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. I'm not. Let's take 10, or maybe it's a side plot and you say, let's deal with it next session. We're going to do it. We are going to do it. We'll deal with it next session when I have time to be like, okay, I know this is what they're going to do. Let's get into this, because at that point, as the DM, you can make it awesome, right? If you have time to prepare, theoretically, the more time you have to prepare, the cooler you can make it for the players. So you can say, this is a cool idea. This is something that's fun to explore. Let's do it together, but let's do it when we're all ready to do it. And I think both as a player and as a DM, you have to be aware that that's something that could happen. I might have an idea that if Mikey, as the DM, isn't ready for it at all, he might be able to say like, "Hey, ReVolt," or even if it's like a private message, like, "Hey, ReVolt, that's a cool side plot that you suggested. I think we should explore that, but maybe next session when I can kind of flesh it out a little bit." And I, as a player, have to be like, "Yeah, like I just said something that was out of left field, right? It was pretty random, and maybe it's cool and maybe it's not, but like I have to work with my DM because my DM can't possibly, I know this because I've DM'd, right? You can't possibly be ready for any random idea or thought that comes into your PC's head. And there is a time to roll with it in the moment, but I think that it's important to be able to make the decision to say like, no, we don't do this right now. We'll do it, but we'll deal with it when we're ready to. Because there are a lot of crazy ideas that your players can have that work better when thought out by the DM than if you force your DM, even a creative DM, to think on their feet.
I don't know. Then you have those cocky DMs like me. If you can ever get me the call an intermission, I will give you
Yeah.
a freaking a huge bonus.
Didn't I get inspiration off of the post rest in peace to Aiden's character?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's fair, right? If you're good at improvising, as you know, a lot of DMs are, and you've got a handle on something, then yeah, go for it. There's nothing wrong with being confident in being ready for something. The point that I'm trying to make is that you shouldn't view it as like a negative that you're not ready for something. If anything, you view that as a positive. It means you've got players who are thinking creatively and playing creatively, and that means that they're engaged in the campaign. It's a good thing, and if something that comes up that you're not ready for happens, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Before I start on the actual stuff that I wanted to talk about, do you guys have anything to add on that part of it?
Nah, you good, boo.
The
good.
other. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Final. Yeah.
No, I just remember when 81 was planning to make almost like a send us to a boat situation. We were supposed to speak with the lead over there. His idea was to get us drugged, put in a cell, but we didn't know that. I just went with a James Bond point of view, go all the way to the bottom of the ship, start a fire there, go out, immediately out, and block the door and burn everybody alive and sink the ship at the same time.
That
And
sounds like the most Final Dash plan of all time.
That sounds very Final
I
Dash plan.
see that plan and I just went, all right, let's just go with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's creative right there.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's a situation where, like, if that happened to me, right, and I had no indication that that was coming, I, as a DM, might be like, well, okay, I need a minute to think. Who's on this ship? How would they react to that? What consequences? Like, because if a fire gets started on a ship, right, a lot of things are gonna happen, and you as a DM need to be like, well, let me prepare for all of these things that are gonna happen, right? Like,
ReVolt, but before that, I was trying to seduce a guard, and then he didn't go with my seduction and just said, well, what the heck? Let's just move downstairs as a disappointed character. Then afterwards, I thought, let's just burn the ship. First check the room. It's empty. All right, let's burn the ship. That's how it went.
yeah.
Wow, I would not.
That's pretty crazy, man. And that's the point, right? Like, random crazy stuff can just happen. And you don't, as the DM, have to be like panic mode of like, oh crap, I'm not ready for this. Like, even to the point of ending a session early, right? Let's say you've planned on a 3-hour session and you're 2.5 hours in and something like that happens. At that point, what I would do is be like, let's throw to some, we're going to deal with this. This is going to be the start of next session, right? Let's throw to some RP time. Let's have, something where we get quality game time in. And we deal with the crazy thing that, like, nobody was ready for next session, right? Because at that point, your players get time to be mentally prepared for that type of event. You, as the DM, get time to prepare for an event. And, at the end of the day, if everybody prepares more, everybody has more fun. So it's a net win.
Boom.
Boom. The other part of improvisation that I wanted to talk about was more of the performance aspect of it. Anyone that's played with me or in one of my campaigns knows that I enjoy doing voices, right? Stuff like that. Anything that can give flavor to a character. And part of that, or some of that, is improvisational, right? I go to a shopkeep, how do I give this shopkeeper something to make them unique? How do I make characters not bland and vanilla, even if they're minor characters? And I think that that's something that can go a long way towards making, the world seem alive and interesting and unique, right? If every NPC you talk to uses you as your GM's vanilla voice to be like, "Hi, we will give you this job," blah 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 blah, and every NPC has this exact tone and way of speaking, right? That's not the most engaging, right?
Even if you butcher a accent, it makes that character unique.
Well, and I would say,
that.
like, it doesn't even have to be an accent, right? It can be a way of speaking, right? let's say I have a serious character, right? And I'm not great at voices. I don't want to do a bunch of crazy voices. I want to have a serious character. So maybe I change not the accent, but their cadence of speaking. Do they end their
Yeah.
sentences with a particular point at the end to show that they mean business? Something like that, right? I don't have to be vocally talented enough to do the voices you want to do, Lottie. You don't have to, right? You just have to try and make it interesting. Do I have a lighthearted character who maybe is going to talk a little bit more jovially, right? And might be more willing to, make a snide comment or a joke, right? Your tone is just as important as the voices that you use, right? And even if you as a DM, right, you get fatigued and you're like, "Look, my players succeeded on a 1 to 20 random roll that I have to do an Arnold Schwarzenegger voice for this NPC, right? Which has happened in my campaigns, right? And that gets very tiring, especially if you're like managing multiple NPCs and you have to go back from like, I am Doringar the Mage, and I'm the Goblin Broody-Tooth, right? If you have to bounce back and forth, that's very difficult to do. And even if you don't maintain the voice, trying to think about how you use your words. Maybe this, like I said, the serious characters have a point at the end of their statements, and the less confident characters maybe speak a little bit more shakily, or like, I don't know, just trying to give any sort of flavor and context to your character, both as a player and as a DM, I think is hugely important. And I feel like it's something that initially looks very imposing, like, whoa, I have to have like the whole unique way of speaking for every NPC. You don't. You can recycle and reuse them, but the point is to have you how you play characters as a DM have a little bit of flavor, have a little bit of meaning. Do they speak with authority? Do they not? Are they, a little bit smooth? Are they, maybe a little bit blunt, right? All of those can be reflected in your cadence, in your tone of voice. And when you have an NPC that you know is going to get used, thinking out how you want to perform that NPC does you a world of good. If I'm going to be playing an NPC, I need to know their attitude, because their attitude, even if it doesn't change, their voice, and even if I have a lot of voices that end up sounding like my voice, which I will because you're the voice of a lot of people, right? You can still make them feel unique and make them sound interesting by the smallest changes of cadence and of tone and stuff like that. Even if you're not like, I'm going to do 17 trillion accents, right? Like, you don't have to be able to do that to still make NPCs sound good.
Rememberable.
Yeah, you want your NPCs, like, if let's say that I'm in Mikey's campaign, and Mikey's got a campaign where there's a character that we interact with that's super intimidating, right? If Mikey talks as that character, and even without Mikey doing the voice, I'm like, yeah, I know which character that is. You're doing it correctly. Even if Mikey is using Mikey voice for the most part, right? He's not like doing an accent for it, right? If he can convey the gravitas and the epitome of that character, he's doing a good job. And I think it's worth thinking about, like, well, maybe not every character has to have a super crazy unique voice. They don't have to. But what are the other ways that I can express the individuality of whatever character I'm portraying right now as the DM?
Top tier DM with his characters. Just gotta say, 100%, man.
Saviour, you got anything to throw in here?
I mean, I'd just be reiterating everything that y'all said. Have some diversity in NPCs so that everything doesn't become boring and bland. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a game, right? So everybody's here to have fun. So spice up your life a little.
Throw in a little bit of spice. And I'll tell you what, even if, like, don't be afraid to do a shitty accent. I try a shit ton of accents. I'll be perfectly frank. I'm good at some accents. I'm really bad at others. I'm really bad. But it doesn't matter, right? Like, it's a fantasy game. You decide what this character sounds like. If someone wants to be like, "Oh, it doesn't even sound like that," it's like, good. It's not trying to sound like that. He's trying to sound like that character. That's how I want that character to sound. Just embrace it. Roll with it. have a good time with it.
It's all that matters. It's supposed to be fun for the DM and the player.
And if you're projecting fun, then your players are more likely to be having fun also. So do we have any questions as to any of the topics related to improvisation that we have touched on here? Then I think
Nah,
we can move on to hard railroads, in parentheses, party caused.
party caused. So, um, as a DM, you're gonna run into some situations where your party does something so out in left field. There's no way in hell you could have prepared for it, improvised it, um, and it literally almost like breaks your whole dynamic for the campaign that you're trying to make, right? Um, so one thing that you can do is you can call for a session to just stop that session and you sit back and think about it. A good thing that you can do is always consent. Get another set of eyes. Get another set of eyes. I know for a fact that I go to ReVolt a lot, or even Saviour. Actually, Saviour has actually recently helped me out with a big problem that I've been having for a while. Um, it's get another set of eyes.
Yeah. I mean, Mikey, how many PMs did you have the night after the mishapped teleportation in my session? Mikey probably woke up to like 18 PMs of me being like, "Mikey, I've got something weird and crazy that's gonna be fun. What do I do?" Right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like get another like DM's perspective, because like no matter what, I don't care how good of a DM you are, having another set of eyes is probably going to be your best friend. You know, like you're never going to beat that. But one thing that you can do in kind of like the moment, let's just say you start off the session and your players throw something completely out of left field that you did all this prep. Let's say you put like 2 hours into prep, you're really excited for the session, and your players just kind of like did something that you didn't see coming at all, which is good for your players. Good, more power to your players, right? But like now it's suddenly like, what do I do as a DM? You know, I want to still have this amazing session for my players, but I don't want to like break my story or anything like that. Well, what you do is you can kind of just roll with it for a moment. You sit back and you feed your players something to role play. What I like to do is allow my players to feed my players something to role play amongst themselves, so I can sit back and I can think. All right, how bad did they railroad me? Another thing you can do is a very fun thing that I like to do is called stall tactics, where I just have my players explore a city. Just literally just have like a day off and they just explore and have a good time exploring. That way they're still getting an enjoyable session out of the day. Um, and it's also giving you plenty of time to sit there and have a good time. And it's not a bad idea to constantly give your players like days off, you know, because like having the constant, oh, we have to go in and do this every session, it starts to wear on your players. You have to
mm-hmm.
give them a little bit of time to have a little bit of fun. You know, it is a fantasy world after all. So like give your players the option to like go out, explore your world, or like explore certain areas because they want to have fun. Give them time to like role play with each other or NPCs, and kind of just be willing to kind of like make things happen, you know.
And
um
to stall, you can like indulge. You can, I guess, I 100% agree. Like indulge in the details, right? If you want to, you can buy yourself time by still making your game more interesting. Now it wasn't necessarily a stall tactic, but one of the things in the most recent session of Shadows that I had is we had a very different session, um, where we took time to be like, all right, well, you're preparing for this feast where you're hosted by a mighty lord. You've got like the full on, you know, spa treatment, and then you get like whatever clothes you want to pick out. And we got like what, like 30, 40 minutes of gameplay based on like hijinks getting into there, and like, okay, you guys get whatever outfit you want. Like, let's talk about that. Like, you get the ultimate outfit. What does their outfit look like? And those things, like, I mean, I guess maybe to some players they're boring, but not being afraid to like deep dive into details to give flavor is a way that not only like gives you time to prepare for something, but also like gives your players more of a mental image and gets them more engaged.
So even if you think your players have like totally broken your campaign, find something to just get your players interested. I mean, literally your players are just they're just there to enjoy the game. They want to play a game. They don't care if like they actually break you or like break the whole campaign. If they successfully break the campaign, the best thing you can do is just be honest. Um like people appreciate honesty because honesty is the best policy, right guys?
Sure.
um they'll appreciate the honesty and it shows that you're human, you know. And I can tell you from being a player or DM, I always because like I know I'm a very chaotic player. ReVolt could contest. He was my DM, the poor soul.
Mikey,
Same with Saviour.
I'm not
He was
going to
my
contest that statement. In fact, I agree with it emphatically. You are a very chaotic player. I love it. I love it, Mikey. I love it. But you are definitely a very chaotic player.
And I have to admit, I do have a tendency to, quote unquote, break cake campaigns because my DMs don't know how to deal with me. Because you can't
Maybe
predict
the
what I'm
chumps
going
don't.
to do. You literally cannot predict what I'm going to do. I mean, I will play some of the off-the-wall characters, like a character that has 25 different personalities.
Yeah, yeah. But it's worth diving into, Mikey Kimmy, and I don't mean this
Oh
as a
yeah.
pure myself dick stroke, but like dive into that. Like, can we talk about the Rat King session, Mikey? Because I've been dying to
Yeah.
talk about the Rat King session. Okay, like Mikey, you go, you like.
Oh, I can go. All right.
I mean, you were the subject of the Rat King session. I feel like you should be the one to, you know.
Well, you were the DM, the awesome DM that like kind of
Yeah,
like
but like
it's like we're
we just
doing this, and I'm like,
deep
oh, we
dived.
are.
We deep dived on something totally random, right? Like,
Yeah. So I was a druid that didn't really understand civilization. And I always interacted. I enjoyed animals more than I enjoyed people. Um. So one thing ReVolt did for me is because I missed a session due to probably like work or life really caught up onto me. I don't quite remember. It's been so long. What ReVolt did, cause like I was happened pretty frequently because life was just not being so nice to me at the time. ReVolt's like, all right, you know what? You need to play some D&D. We're gonna have a private one-on-one session. Your character goes down into the sewers and we'll see where this goes. ReVolt had no plan for it. He was just like, we're gonna see where this goes. And well, next thing I know, I take care of a nest of rats, and
it was
I
snake. No,
become
no,
their
no, it
king.
was the snakes. It was the snake or the
Oh
slithers.
yeah,
The slithers.
I took care of the slithers, man. I took care of those snakes.
Yeah, but I mean, the cool thing for me there was that like Mikey had a concept of a character, one that I was not totally prepared for at all. And even in my session 0, right? Like we went a little crazy with it. And the idea of that, instead of balking from something that's going, because Mikey as a player is a very difficult player to DM. That's a good thing, but he is. He's a difficult player to DM because he's going to push the limits of what you're ready for. He's going to dive into different stuff. And if you have a player like that, not being afraid to be like, all right, yeah, let's deep dive. Let's go with something random and let's deep dive into it, right? And that's what we kind of did in our solo session, being like, all right, like, is this going to be perfect? No. Is this going to be like the pinnacle of rule following in D&D gameplay? Absolutely not. But like, let's get weird. Let's deep dive into it. If our player has a strange idea, something that's gonna like take us into left field and maybe we get like good gameplay from it, let's just go for it and like see what happens, you know? Like just take the leap, you know? Just you're at the edge of the cliff, just take the leap of faith and you know, work with your players and roll with it.
Yeah.
Does anyone have anything else, or should we address Indy's question?
No, let's address the question.
Uh, he said, but you can know your players as DM along sessions, so you can imagine what they're going to do in some situations, right? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to think about who your characters are. Do you have a lawful party? Do you have an evil party? Do you have a chaotic party? And again, I don't really like alignment in general, but you know, thinking along those terms, right? If you have characters that you know act predictably, and again, this favors being further into a campaign, you can absolutely have a better shot at predicting what they're going to do, right? In Shadows, which, you know, is a campaign that I'm running now that's been going for over a year, about like, you know, 15 months at this point. I know my party pretty well. I know that if they go into this situation, I have a rough estimate of what they're going to do, right? Because I've played with them. I know these characters. I know how they think. I know how they make decisions. So I don't have to deal with, like, well, what if the paladin that's been like the stalwart bulwark of righteousness for 17 sessions is going to turn into like the crazy most evil person in the world? Because if someone's playing their character correctly, that's just not going to happen. So I think the point there is that, like, prepare for what is predictable, right? People and characters, because characters are played by people, generally act somewhat predictably. Now, obviously not completely, but if you have a party that's like, yeah, well, they generally do the right thing, you want to focus your preparation on the path that involves doing the right thing, because probability would state that that's probably the path that's going to be explored. So he's going to play Clash. Well, good luck, Indy. And yeah, I'm gonna put the link in the D&D chat after I get it uploaded. So yeah, we'll hit you with that. But yeah, again, you know, prepare for what's predictable the most, right? Even if you've got this like whole cool side path, like don't feel like you want to railroad your characters just because you have a cooler idea. Prepare the most for what is most likely to happen, and prepare the least for what is least likely to happen.
One thing that I can even say that I've done myself, recently, my players, partaked in defending, against a siege of a city, and not like the, oh, we're just gonna sit outside and, wait for your city just to kind of, you guys just to either come and attack us outside your city walls, or, you're just going to starve to death siege. I'm talking like catapults shooting at them and everything. And I kind of predicted what my players were going to do, and I prepared for it. I was mentally and physically prepared. I looked up all the rules. I looked up like assault tactics of like different kings and stuff like that. And my party did some of the tactics similar, and they reacted similar to what other kings and other warlords have done in the past, which then I proceeded to use advanced military tactics, which is something that I prepared for as a DM, and I was ready for whatever my players were going to try and railroad me with.
You
You know?
bastard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you
I
bastard,
am
Mikey.
a very evil DM.
You fastidious DM bastard. Yeah.
Yeah, I am a very evil DM. Don't let anyone fool you. You don't want to be in my campaigns, right?
I mean, Mike, you also had the session that we decided to, out of the blue, save one of the people that are supposed to take the fall that you were
Oh yeah, I
semi
did.
not prepared for.
I was not prepared for it. My party decided to railroad me really hard, so they went on a murder hoboing spree, and I completely forgot about this. Thank you, Joey. My party went on a total murder hoboing spree, right? And what I did was, instead of one of them getting beheaded because they were able to fix it, because they kind of like convinced the king to let them fix it. and not having one of the party members be beheaded for it. What I did was the king still needed someone to take the fall for it, and my party members felt super bad that two of these men took the fall for something that they didn't do at all. Um and what they did was they pleaded with the king to save these men by basically saying that they'll be responsible and they'll take care of them. And I was like, all right, that's kind of cool. I wasn't prepared for it because my party's never shown like a sense of like guilt before. And I think it finally hitting home for them really made them like show a sign of guilt, and which was kind of what I was trying to get at, but I was never able to successfully do until this moment. And I partially was prepared for it, but I wasn't at the same time because all my efforts never succeeded. So like I was just kind of like had a shred of doubt. I'm like, I'm just gonna do this. I'm not expecting a good result. Um, but I got a better result than what I thought, and I wasn't prepared for it. But me as a DM, I rolled with it. One thing that I did was I gave my party members a lot of time to RP with each other. Um, and I kept describing things as I tried to figure out the best kind of way to go about things. Which my thing was, um, you're not allowed to bring this person back, and if they cause any trouble in the world and I find out, I'll have you beheaded along with that person. And I was like, you also have to kill this person in front of this crowd of people because they want to see death. Um, because the king was trying to please a mob. Um, because mob rule is very, very scary when you have mobs just kind of like forming. You have to somewhat please them to some extent. And the mob wanted blood, so the king had to give them blood. Um, they wanted someone to blame. Um, so that's what the king did. And then the king paid for that person to be resurrected and given to the party members. Um, And I thought that was a very crazy thing. And now my party members are investing so much into this new NPC that I never thought they would actually just randomly pick up. I thought they were just going to screw off from the city and go off about their day, like they've always been all campaign long. So I thought that was a really cool thing. And I'm really excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah.
Anything else, guys?
I think I'm good. If Saviour has nothing to add and we have no questions, I think we can move on, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about descriptions. This one I think we covered largely in the improvise section. But it's one that I wanted to talk at least initially a little bit about because it's something that I have tried to focus on a little bit more in my campaigns as of late is being colorful in your descriptions and being elaborate in them and delving into them. You want your world to feel alive. You want what you say to sound interesting. You want to speak with importance. And a lot of that is by describing things. Um Even if it's a something that's like a minor set piece, the chalice of the dwarven king is adorned with gold and jewels, as is the throne he sits on. Anything like that, like diving deep into giving your players a mental image. I don't know about anybody else, but both as a player and as a DM, I am most engaged when I can most visualize what is happening right now in the campaign. Um, I think an easy example for me, and maybe a little bit of recency bias here, is my most recent shadow session where we actually had two players, fight as part of a plan to get something later, but blah 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 blah. The details aren't important. But the point is that we got very deep into the description of the fight. It wasn't a flat like he rolls, he hits, he rolls, that's a save. Like getting out of the vanilla and getting into the descriptive. Does your character crit? How do they kill this beast? You know, the echoing effects of their magics shatter the air. Anything, just being descriptive. And what I've started to try and do is if I have a scene that I know is going to happen, right? And railroads aside, right? Like sometimes especially going into a session, you know that like, well, this is where we're going to open. We know that much at least, right? Taking time beforehand to write out a description. What's going on in the hall? What's going on in the tavern? What is this guy wearing? What does this guy look like? What kind of, look on his face does he have? Anything that can make the game more visual for everyone that's playing it. And I think that like it cannot be overstated the importance of just being like, how do I make it visual? Because it's one thing to be like, there's a guy there and he looks like super strong and you're super scared. And instead be like, the swordsman twirls his blade with a clearly practiced hand, sliding them against each other. You know that this is a trained fighter, one learned in the arts of death, as he begins to tactically circle you and prepare for your demise, right? Your player now that's fighting that guy in this specific instance might be like, oh, well, shit, like now I'm like into it, right? Like this guy's a badass. Now I gotta try and beat his ass, Anything that you can do to go from like the vanilla, like you are fighting a guy that has two swords that he will try and cut you with, to like, okay, how do I imagine this? I'm fighting this guy. What does this look like? Ultimately, I feel like D&D is largely like like cinematography simulator. You're trying to form these imaginations, these stories in your mind, and the more that you can give to your players to feel into it, to feel whether that's music, right? Maybe you play something thematic to what's going on. Maybe it's the specific descriptors that you give that get your party engaged in what's going on. Maybe it's small details into, what happens when they strike a target. Any of that that makes it more visual and more visceral, I think is overall a huge positive.
Another thing that you can use your descriptions to do is to deter your players from doing something. Especially when they get in the higher levels, when they feel like they're invincible. I've had I think they were like level 12, 13 or something like that. I deterred a player from a CR 1/4, which is like less than level 1 could kill this monster. I had a CR 12 or a player level 12 to 13 character terrified to death from the CR quarter. This player could probably just blow on this NPC and kill him, to be fair and frank. But like he was terrified by the way I described him. What I did was I had him take a man that was beaten, well, not really beaten. He didn't show any beaten wounds, but he was starving. He was weakened. He was already he was mentally beaten. And this NPC went in and just beat the living hell out of him. He was a bigger dude, and the NPC beat the living hell out of him because the man was already mentally broken. And so then the player going into this NPC was like, I don't want to mess with this guy. He's really powerful. Like, I don't want to mess with this. In reality, the player could have just probably been like, I can wipe the floor with him.
You've been
But like,
dumpstered.
yeah, right? Like, but your players don't know that. And use that. Use that mystery that you have as the DM. You have all knowledge. Your players have a very limited point of view. And you can use your descriptions to terrify your players or incentivize your players to do certain things. Um, it's not always about trying to get the upper hand on the players. You can always incentivize them. Maybe you want them to talk to someone. Um, you could have someone who's just constantly talking with people. You have a player that likes to gamble a lot. Show a gambling table where people are walking away winning. Maybe it'll incentivize them to go to the gambling table because they want to win. And then suddenly you can steal their money. Or if you want to be a kind and generous DM, you can let them win.
Yeah.
You know,
Or
it
depending on
allows
how the
you
rolls
to
go,
do
the
things.
point is that like description can breed a story hook. If you give a description that you're like, all right, it's just a description, sometimes that hooks a player. They're like, whoa, 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 that sounds cool as shit. Let me interact with that. You know, like you can bait story hooks out of just pure describing things that like may or may not be interesting.
I'm good.
Savior.
Yeah, I feel like just being able to describe things, it makes it more interesting for everybody because you're starting to be able to visualize what is going on. They were talking about descriptions like just being able to describe people, but it can even go into the battlefield basically and into combat, as ReVolt was saying a little bit earlier. To kind of quote the probably the most common D&D show that I know, at least, Critical Role. Every time that like a big monster or like the big bad evil guy of like whatever, like of whoever they're fighting, dies, they or Matt Mercer always says, "How do you want to do this?" And he gives the players an opportunity to describe, like, and give everybody else a visual of what happens, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So just being able to do that and being able to visualize what is happening just makes it more interesting and more entertaining.
Yeah, so something because I agree. I think that's 100% true. So something that I like to do, right, is when my characters hit or when they do something, I describe it. And it's just like a regular thing, and that's part of like a trust in my own like descriptional skills. But when it's like an epic moment, let's say it's every boss in my campaign ever, and Kugel is about to smite it to kill it, right? Let's say it's all of them, right? Uh, no, but like you know what I'm saying, right? Like let's say a crit comes in at a crit at no pun intended, a critical time, or an epic blow lands that had a low chance of success, or something like that. Be like, what does that look like? Your character weaves these magics, and it has this effect. But like, what does shield look like? The shield that keeps the the frontline fighter alive at the critical moment, so he can strike the killing blow. What does that look like? Magical energy springing in, to block the blow, allowing him enough time to breach the guard of his opponent and stab them in the heart, right? Like things like that can not only breed like your characters feeling like they're badass instead of being like, oh yeah, I gave him AC and that helped, being like, yeah, like I shielded him with my magics that blocked the blow that allowed him to cave in the head of my opponent. Like anything like that gives it flavor. And whenever you have an epic moment, if you know that your player is like down to roll with it, like Saviour was just saying, just being like, yeah, how do you do it? What does that look like? You crit him and you kill him. What does Dave the Barbarian look like when he kills this guy? What happens? And that lets your characters get involved in the descriptive storytelling, which I mean, hey, like that's less you have to do, right? Like if your characters want to be like, yeah, I do a triple spin backflip and then like cleave him in twain, right? Like, okay, cool, that sounds fucking awesome, right? You have a mental image. Your player gets to feel like they've been like, yeah, this is how cool my guy is, and like everybody wins. So, anybody have anything to add on descriptions, and do we have any questions?
The only thing I would add on is as a player, don't feel afraid to ask your DM for like either specific descriptions or to like describe things, because like your DM, like we said, might have an off day, or maybe they just didn't think about it. Maybe you force them to like make an improvised encounter or something like that. I don't know what the specific situation is, but maybe you know something's going on. You can ask your DM to enhance your experience. It's a communication thing to both of you guys to kind of always work together and enhance each other's experience to make it even better for
I mean,
everyone.
I'll tell you what, if when I'm DMing and a player asks me like, whoa, 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 go in more in depth, what does that look like? What does that sound like? Like, what is it like? Tell me more about the feel. When I get that sort of question as a DM, I'm not sitting there like, oh man, I didn't describe it good enough. I'm like, oh cool, he's so engaged. He wants to know more. He wants to hear about this. He wants to like I need to go more in depth about this. That means that your players are engaged. That's a good thing. And as a player, you should be like down to get into that. So cool. I think that covers that, and we're down to our last topic, which is good. We're getting towards the time I was aiming for. Anyway, terrain usage slash unique fight mechanics. Let's dive right on in because I would like to start Shadows in the nearest future anyway. So, who's taking the lead on this one?
I think it was Mikey.
Sure, I'll take lead on this. So one thing that you can do as a DM is to put encounters that aren't just straightforward, like enemy is 10 feet away from you. Okay, you walk 10 feet to the enemy. Now you guys are in just a straight slap, slugfest between each other. Yeah, you could do fights like that, but you can find more interactive fights where you have enemies hiding into the trees, obscuring themselves from you. How do you want to get through that? Or maybe they're in a cave and you have enemies that are hiding in uh little caverns above them, or maybe they're slipping and sliding out of cracks of the ground, or maybe they're even burrowing through the ground and attacking your players from underneath them, beneath their feet, or above them. Or you can even use, if they don't have like dark vision, let's say, use the fact that they don't have dark vision against them and throw in the darkness where you have mobs attacking them from the darkness. Or if they have sunlight sensitivity, use that to their disadvantage also. You can even have your players use that to their advantage. Put terrain. Maybe you have your players are crossing a road and they're on a bridge, and you have creatures that are trying to climb up onto the bridge to attack your players, while your players basically can get a few extra blows onto those creatures before they can get up onto the bridge to attack your players. um Stuff like that will engage your players and force more creativity in how they're going to use fight dynamics, and it will force them stop and be like, well, it's different. It'll be different every combat. It'll make them be like, well, it's different. I don't take my great axe and I just swing twice at this guy because I'm a barbarian. I raged. I'm a barbarian. Now I have to contemplate, do I want to throw a javelin at that guy, or do I want to sprint dead full force away from my team to go take that guy? Or maybe I should stay right here. It makes your players think differently, and it stops them from doing the same thing over and over again. Maybe it forces them to kind of like kite around. Maybe you're in a big open field where you have to use your players who have high range to kind of take out characters from like 500 feet away. I've had fights like that. It was quite an intense fight, but stuff like that. Like, you can utilize all that because there are some feats into D&D that actually promote creativity with terrain, and maybe you can incentivize your players to do that, to pick up those feats. If you're throwing a lot of terrain encounters. And so then your players are going to begin thinking, well, maybe I should take this feat because then it could benefit me more because my DM wants to roll with it, you know? Because you can go on YouTube and look up top 10 best feats for D&D, and yeah, those feats are really good. But I I'm not going to say like, they can even, there's even lists for like top 10 worst feats in D&D, and I guarantee you most of them are going to say Keen Mind is in the top 10. Well, in my campaigns, Keen Mind is one of the best feats because I utilize its fact. I make sure my players get lost. You have Keen Mind, you never get lost. You always know what way's north. I use the fact that they don't know what time it is. If they can't see the sun, I use weather. So it blocks out the sun so they can't get a judge of what time of day it is. Keen Mind's like, I already know what time of day it is. I've been counting the hours. Um I even use the fact that my players don't have full memory. If they don't take good enough notes, Keen Mind is like, yeah, here, I got this for you. You know, I utilize stuff like that. I try and make sure every feat has its place in my world. And it allows for different tactics to go about my campaigns. And I'll let my two assistant DMs here, or actually
Whoa!
they're more
Wow!
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how.
Wow.
Oh, hey, boss Mikey. I'm your assistant DM here. Oh gosh.
Wow.
Yes, you guys are my assistants for this one because I took lead.
You hear that, ReVolt? We're just chopped liver.
He
now.
runs.
I
He
know.
runs. He runs his first workshop, and suddenly we're the assistants. You know, hey,
I
what a
know,
guy!
right?
What a guy!
Wow.
Look at so good I am.
Working.
No, but I think it's a good point. One of the things that I try and do is reward players for planning and de-incentivize them from yeeting their way into situations, right? If they're gonna just be like, all right, yeah, there's a threat here. All right, yeet, here we go. Yeah. Throw terrain, throw obstacles, throw things that, like, maybe if one might have planned around this fight, might have gone differently. And if they're, recently I had a fight in Other Shadows that, like, they spent half the session preparing for this fight, right? They were like, okay, he's going to be here. They're going to be here. We're going to do this if this happens, and this if this happens, and we've got a game plan because we know what we're trying to do, and this is what we're trying to do, and we have positioned ourselves and planned so that we can execute this very well, right? Letting that go well. They faced a hard fight, and they yeeted it because they weren't afraid to be like, hey, let's be ready for this. Let's say, like, we know what's coming at us. Let's prepare ourselves optimally for what's coming. And letting your party be like, yeah, what do you know? A hard fight might go better for you if you prepare for it. And if you're just like, okay, well, let's YOLO in and see what happens. Yeah, what do you know? You might face obstacles that you didn't expect or know were there. You might face hindrances that might prevent your party from working at full capacity. Rewarding your players for preparation and for, as Mikey said, taking feats that aid in preparation that might allow them to be ready for that, and disincentivizing the, like, let's YOLO in. Well, yeah, if you YOLO in, maybe I throw a curveball at you. Maybe there's this modifier that could have been noticed but wasn't because you weren't ready. You weren't trying to, like, prepare yourself for this.
Yeah. I like it.
You like it?
You
I like it.
Saviour?
I love it, and I want some more of it.
Ooh, man. Kind of want some more too, Revolt. You got anything else for us, Steady Revolt?
Oh shit. I always got more.
I will say, for unique fighting mechanics, right? And this is something that ReVolt does a lot more than what I do. And but it's also you have to have the time to do it, right? Is, as we said before, 5e is pretty straightforward on its enemies, on its mobs, on like the monsters and stuff that you can fight. But at the end of the day, those are just like a guideline, You can go through and modify the monsters in like specific areas to have different abilities and different traits than what D&D says they have.
To be fair, I think I do that more than anybody, not just you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Just a little. I don't do it as much as Revolt. I do it very minimum.
I do it to, like, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's not even that though. It's you can take like monsters from other books, like and like what comes to mind is Pathfinder, right?
Yeah.
You can pull like monsters from different RPGs such as Pathfinder.
I mean, that
and
was the first
adjust
half
them.
of. That was the first half. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but like and adjust them to the 5e mechanics, basically, which is because I don't know Pathfinder very well, but I know that like AC and stuff is
Very different. Yeah.
quite different. But you can go through and you can do stuff like that too for the experienced players who is like, oh, I already know what this monster does. It basically they can go through and they get surprised by the new mechanics and stuff that happen.
Yeah, and because I mean the curse of knowledge is real, right? And I know this as a DM. Because when I face enemies, specifically of like ones I've prepared for when I DM a lot when I'm playing, I'm like, okay, well, I don't know, but I do know what this guy does, right? Like I don't, but I do.
Yeah.
And that puts your player in a
Yeah, but-
difficult spot because they got to be like, well, I have to like pretend like I don't know this, but like low-key I kind of do. So like, how do I do this without metaing, right? Just change things around a little bit. Just it doesn't have to be. Oh, go ahead, Final.
But can't you just change the picture of the enemy so they'll not recognize it?
I mean, you can. That's one way to go about it. But
the thing is, though, is that the bigger monsters are so memorable.
yeah,
It doesn't matter what picture you have.
like let's say
Of,
you're
like-
operating with like a red dragon, right? Like a super iconic enemy that, if you've played, you might have faced, and if you've DM'd, you might have used, and either way, you might be familiar with, right? Tweak it around. Give them a little spells. Mess with their DCs. Mess with their saves. Mess with their breath attack. Mess with all of it. Change it a little bit. You don't have to like full overhaul everything. I certainly don't. I mess around with things, but I don't like. It's not like I'm sitting here overhauling every single thing that ever gets used. Just tweak it around. Make it different. Mikey's DM'd a shit ton. I know he's dealt with all these monsters. So let's give him something that's the same, but it's different. So even if Mikey is trying his hardest to not meta, right? Which is hard to do when you know a lot about, an enemy, right? Make that impossible for him because he's like, oh well shit, like I don't know what he might have changed. I don't know what he wouldn't have changed. Um just keep them on their toes a little bit,
Another thing that is in your DM's arsenal is called reskinning. You could take a character sheet from another monster and just put it in a whole new body. You just give your players a whole nother image of a completely different monster, and you use that other monster stat block for it. So if you have a problem with metagaming, they're gonna be like, they see a picture, and then they're gonna be like, I know what that is. That's a zombie, or or that's a red dragon, or that's the kraken, or an aboleth, or a beholder. When in reality, it's not. It's something different. And your players are going to start guessing what it is, but they are not. They're going to be completely wrong because it could be anything. The pre-made character sheets that D&D has, there's so many. There's no way in the short amount of time frame that combat lasts that your player is going to pick up what you reskinned it to. They don't have enough time because it could take them weeks to go through every single character sheet. And I have a lot of them memorized, and I still can't I wouldn't be able to pick it out of thin air.
And I think that's a point as a player too, to like don't be that guy, right? Like don't be the guy that's like, "Oh, I wonder if I can figure out exactly what it is and maybe find the stat sheet and then know everything," right? That's tempting because it gives you a combat advantage, but like I feel like there's a violation of the spirit of the rules there,
Hmm. But yeah, and I find that it gives your players a lot more flavor. I specifically love to use the I think it's like a drow assassin type thing. Or like there's like drow gunslingers. All I do is I remove their sunlight sensitivity, their elven like bonuses that they get, and I'll make them a human, or I'll make them a Goliath, and I'll just give them the Goliath bonus. I go look at what the Goliath race gets, and I'll give them those bonuses. I'll change up their languages. It's you know, all of a sudden, suddenly that drow gunslinger, my players don't know it's a drow gunslinger by what the character sheet says, but in reality, it could be a Goliath gunslinger, it could be a Tabaxi gunslinger, it could be a rogue. They don't know what it is, and there's in there. Your players have a limited point of view. You have a completely omniscient point of view. You could see everything. Your players have this like little tiny box, and they're trying to look through this little box and see what's in it. And you can just show what you want, and you can see outside that box, and you can keep pushing things from the outside into that little box, and your players are trying to picture what you put into their little box. And you want to keep putting in stuff like that, and it'll keep your players a lot more interested in your campaign, and it'll make a lot more for different dynamics for your players. Anything else, guys?
I think I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm good.
you good? Well, thank you everyone for listening in to us babble. Hope you guys learned something. If you guys do have any questions, or maybe you have a topic that we didn't cover today, or haven't covered yet, or maybe it's a previous topic that you want us to enlighten on a little bit more. We wanna keep doing these, and we kind of need more topics to keep going on.
Alright.
Right now, we're kind of like
Marriage,
collaborating. What was that final?
marriage, kids,
That seems like
divorce.
something to handle in another episode.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We
But
could
yeah.
definitely do that in
I
another
don't even have a
episode.
girlfriend. What do you want to know?
I know, right?
D&D style.
I think
Oh,
I'm going to
man.
cut the recording here. Thanks everybody for listening in, for participating in, for anybody that ends up watching. And yeah. Good stuff.
See you in the next one.